I don't know. What do you think on this whole thing, Dexter? Have you got any thoughts on this, the initial move?
On the TSM move, I mean, yeah, I think if you spend that kind of money for like any player, it's always like a very emotional decision, right? It's like a normal sales process. So I feel that while it was I don't know what was going on internally, I do feel that it was like a move that was also pressured by Steve and Jack making fantastic move themselves, right? So I don't think that Reginald is just someone that could have signed someone on like maybe like someone lesser skilled and just call it a day. I do think that after you sign someone like Alfari to Team Liquid and re-sign Jensen and Perks going to C9, when you know that kind of stuff, you kind of have to.
You got to match them.
Yeah, you have to match them, and you also have to kind of justify to your fan base that, hey, how can it be that these two teams make these great moves and we are going empty-handed? So I do feel that there was a lot of pressure and emotions involved in making that decision to actually pull the trigger for like $6 million over 2 years.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, ideally, I think like he said in this interview that if we don't make it past I don't know, like top 4 or top 2 in worlds, then it was a failure. So I think whatever happens in the split and during the split, like I have the same standards like I put C9 to, that if they actually make it to worlds and they go far, then it was probably worth it in the end. But if they come short and don't make it out of groups again, I don't really know how if they're gonna continue with him in the next year. I don't know how the contract is structured and how that all went out, but initially, I would say that it's probably, I mean, if you spend that kind of money, and to me, what was more logical was that if you sign PoE, why don't you just sign Igna as well? You know, it's like a proven duo.
Yeah.
They have done fantastic work. You've seen that when Igna came in with FlyQuest, he elevated their team to like another level. He has already done very well against T1 with PoE in the past. So to me, it indicates that either I don't know why they didn't go with Igna, but for me it was the logical thing that if I sign PoE, okay, I need to upgrade my support. I might as well just take Igna here. So for me, just taking that into consideration, that it was more like an emotional move and more than anything else, and just from the pressure from the other two sides, I would assume that this was how it really went down. And yeah, and then the double lift thing, yeah, no idea. Again, I would have to speculate how the internal timeline was, why that happened to be like that, and yeah, and now they ended up with Lost, who we'll see how he performs. Still like a rookie, right, and needs like a lot of work probably. So maybe it's a waste to put some support level with that kind of play tech and then pair him with a rookie. You would expect that you make that kind of roster to really put like an elite bot lane that can compete against anyone in the worlds, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we don't have enough data.
Agree with that.
We don't have enough data to really justify. Maybe they're popping off. Maybe they're actually the best bot lane by the time World comes around. But until then, I don't really think that we can make a fair assessment of if it's going to be worth it or not. Right? We have to see how Worlds plays out.
To be honest, I kind of disagree with that to an extent. Obviously, like I agree with the fact that we can't know. Right? Of course. I mean.
Yeah.
Hypothetically, they could win Worlds, right? And it's like, oh, see, it was worth it. But I think this is a situation we can actually look without even really needing any kind of hindsight. I think this is a ridiculously stupid move. And I think putting that much investment into a player whose performance is going to be solely linked to someone else on the team is absolutely absurd, especially when that player is a rookie. I don't know much about Lost. I would be lying if I pretended that I'd been following this guy's career closely or whatever. But I think spending $6 million over 2 years on a player who a huge chunk of his game is predicated, for example, on how well you can do in lane, and not just in a literal laning capacity, but also how well does the partnership enable Sword to roam and move as he would like to make plays around the map while his AD carry can take care of himself. All these things are directly linked to the performance of Lost as well. And I think spending that amount of money on a completely untested partnership is absolutely ludicrous. If you're going to spend that kind of money, you should spend it on someone like a Perks, where you're a guy who's he's playing mid lane, a lane which is like you take care of yourself. How you move and how you roam is largely predicated on your own decision making and the own out of your own agency, right? Obviously, jungle and stuff it plays a role, but when you have an ADC support relationship and you're spending $6 million on half of that relationship, to me that makes absolutely no sense at all, especially when it's completely untested. I think it's a ludicrous allocation of funds.
It is, but at the same time, I think if you would have to look at what impact core JJ had, right? Would you, with that knowledge, based on what he has done over like the last years, would you have maybe spent the same money for someone like core JJ? Because it obviously had a very great impact, right? He was the MVP, I think, of the league. He was having a phenomenal performance. So,
but you were pairing him with superstar AD carry.
Yes.
So it's completely different. If
in
that sense, you're paying, let's say it's the same amount of money, you're paying the 6 million to complete bot lane Exodia, right?
Yes,
Whereas this time you're paying 6 million to who the fuck knows, roll a dice, basically.
Yeah, no,
I actually, go on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying, I'm just saying that I think I believe it was a highly emotional decision. That's what I think was the whole deal about it. And I would have never, if I would have been the GM of that team, I would have never ever spent that kind of money, because I couldn't have justified it in my world if I would have been a GM. Even if it wasn't my money and it was VC money, I don't think I could have justified making that move like work in any way. So, yeah.
See, this is the thing. To me, it all ties in. Like, obviously, we can talk about the other roster moves as well, but I think it all ties together in a similar sentiment. Like, obviously, I don't know if they actually did do the double lift thing off emotion or not. It just looks a little bit dodgy, because in my opinion, like, fuck off if you say Lost is better than double lift. He obviously isn't, you idiot. Like, I've watched both of them play. Like, Lost looked like a player who had some potential. He looked all right when I watched him play. He's the sort of player who should be on Golden Guardians. Let's be reasonable. Like, he's not, like, what are the odds? Like, put it this way, if people are prodigies, they don't just lay dormant for the first 2 or 3 years. That's the definition of a prodigy. You're just a fucking banger out the gate. Like, so if not, then you have to believe you can develop him, which I'm doing air quotes for that because it's about the most sinister fucking term in esports. Usually it just means I just gambled on this guy and I'm just praying he's good. Like, you don't develop him. Who's going to fucking teach him? Like, it's Sword Art going to teach him, is he? Because, by the way, think about it logically. Sword Art already looked fucking washed at Worlds as it was, and he was playing with someone who, by all accounts, is a fucking prodigy in China. So if anything, you're just going to see a worse bot lane than what they had in that team, in the Sunning team. So to me, yeah, I think this move is crazy, but I think it all ties into the bigger picture, which is, in my opinion, I think Dexter's nailed it. First of all, if you're TSM and you're going to go around for the last 3 years totally disingenuously, and I would say just outright dishonestly, pretending that cause your company apparently makes a profit, trying to like conflate that with your League of Legends division making a profit, which they always do to their fans. If you're going to do that, well, okay, I'll hold you at your word. You better fucking spend some of the money then. You better not be min-maxing after that. Like, at least the other people will admit they lose money, of course. So if you're going to do that, right, as Dexter says, if Team Liquid again re-ups with like massive signings, like clearly some of the best players in the West, if even Cloud9, the ones that normally the fucking penny pinchers, if they break the bank and get perks, guys, we've got to have some big signings. So in my opinion, this looks like they fucked up the off-season, and as a result, the only way they could get the big names that were sort of vaguely within reason to want to join TSM was this bunch of people. So they were like, right, Hooney, well, he's always a big name, or something like that. Get Sword Art, wasn't he in the Finals of Worlds? And then I can only imagine some absolute brainlet level of like, but PoE was in the LCS final against us before. Like, listen, I think PoE's a good player. Point is, though, he's replacing Bjergsen for fuck's sake. Like, to me, this just looks so slapdash as a roster. Like, I don't even hate all the players. Like, you could sign any player in isolation to this team. I could maybe find a way to mentally make it work. But collectively, I think this is a train wreck. I'm amazed people are kind of like hyped on this. I know TSM fans can sort of convince themselves of anything, but this one really is pushing the boat out to me. Especially if you then know they also spent fucking tons of money on it.
It's the Football Manager lineup.
Yes.
Right? And I think this is one of those situations as well, where, as I said, I kind of see it similar to not just the Sword Art situation specifically, but even in hindsight, if it somehow all clicks and TSM go on a run and they're, I mean, they're not doing shit in Worlds, let's be real, but if they make like NA finals or something, people will look back and say, yeah, see, these were good moves. I think that there is still a large chunk of synergy between players and also players as people that you can never really predict. And if it does happen, I think it will actually purely be luck, to be honest. I think I see when I look at these names, I don't see any correlation or I can't connect the dots as why these combination of players they thought would be a really good idea. And again, it comes back to this whole idea of at the start of the season, you have your short list of players for each position, but also you're connecting dots up and down in those positions of, if I get this guy for top lane, let's say, then my number 2 jungler maybe becomes my number 1 jungle option, right? Because either they have history together or I know their play styles will mesh or whatever. And like Dexter made a point about, why don't you bring in Ignar here? Like, even if Ignar wasn't technically the best option, there is at least several logical threads that connect him making sense on this team, right? So yeah, I don't know. I think this is a poorly constructed roster, and yeah, I don't see it working. And I also kind of see, in some ways, the Bjergsen being a coach as an extension of that. And this may be slightly unfair because I don't know Bjergsen super well, and for all I know, maybe he could end up being a great coach. But I also think that this is just a super easy, convenient thing where it's like, I look at the roster, and if I apply what I believe was the same mindset to the roster, it's not surprising to me that Bjergsen would be coach. It's like, this guy was a really good mid laner for ages. Most people think he was kind of smart about the game as well. So if he's smart about the game, he should be able to teach other people to be smart about the game. Boom, he's coach because he says he wants to retire. Great. This is like a really convenient career path for him. Again, I would preface that by saying that's more of a guess than anything else, you know? So for all I know, he could be a great option, but I lose faith in the coach position purely based off what I see from how the roster was put together. And also, presumably, Bjergsen had a say in the roster, right? So my first impressions of Bjergsen as a coach, if he did indeed have a say in the roster, are not good.
Yeah, one thing I would say about that is, again, it's kind of like you said before. Like, I agree. It doesn't matter even if TSM end up being awesome at the end. They didn't fucking know that. They don't have a crystal ball. So just because you lock into it doesn't mean it was the right move. Like, we're judging the moves in isolation now at the beginning of this. We're asking now, is it a good move or not? Like, otherwise you end up in mad scenarios where, like, by the logic before, like, well, you should have let Jensen go because it meant you get perks in there. Like, they didn't know that. They just thought, I'd get rid of him and get fucking Niski. Like, those are two separate decisions, boys. You can't tie those together. So what I would say is this. One thing we can absolutely inarguably say right now, Rich, is Bjergsen has zero experience coaching. He has never coached ever. And you're going to put him on a team where you're...
Not true. I'm pretty sure he was telling Loco to shut up every 2 minutes so he could have his say.
Okay,
in that,
fair enough.
Scenario.
Oh no, listen, he's ruined a lot of coaches, you know, and probably has tried to take over without, and by the way, the most genius way to coach. By the way, Bjergsen, you're not very smart, are you? The best way to coach is just be the leader of the team, literally short circuit every coach you don't like, but then just leave them to carry the can when it doesn't work out. That's fucking genius, mate. It's called covering your arse. Like, now you just straight up are the one that's to blame if it doesn't work out. So, but the thing I find crazy about this angle as well is, like, yeah, as I say, he's never done it before. So what are the odds that from minute one he's just amazing? Because the reason the player angle doesn't make any sense is even the really great coaches who were players, it's like I said about rookies who were players in general, they take time to warm up. Like even Mithy, mate, if anyone should have been a lock to be a god tier coach, it is Mithy, because he is someone who legitimately has coached people on his teams, led his teams, everything. And even he, if you go watch my reflections with him, will sort of admit, like, I had a massive amount of flaws, like I didn't really know what the role was. I would find myself not even understanding the relationship, like, am I supposed to be friends with these guys? Like, what am I supposed to tell? Like, essentially, even he understood, because he's actually, you know, a pretty honest guy. Like, yeah, it's a new game. It's a new craft. You have to level up. This entire roster is an absolute clusterfuck, I think. Like, I know people are kind of hyped because they're like, oh, but what if this, that, and the other? It's like, put it this way, right? Inexperienced coach, and even worse, by the way, probably the most unfireable coach right now. Then secondly, you've got a lineup of players where I don't think, never mind being the best, not only are none of these players going to be the best at their role, I don't even know if half of them end up being top 3 at their role. So bearing in mind, it's TSM for fuck's sake. I made this point before when I said about how I don't want to hear that Bjergsen's a sick coach and knows all shot calling and stuff. Mate, all they did in his rosters, where possible, was ram talent, just individual talent, into the different spots. And they still never had any fucking macro, like, ever, basically. They were the ones who played, like, that's the joke of why Reginald should never be in those fucking rooms on those documentaries. Motherfucker, I watched your whole career. You were the moron who thought win lane, win the game was a thing, like, to now. You think it's a thing now in, like, 2021? Like, if that was true, like, how could RNG ever lose to fucking G2 or something? Like, it could never happen, could it, you idiot? So, I think that it's just such a weird roster, because I don't really know how to get hyped about it. Like, I haven't got an in. Even if I like a player like PoE, like, where's my in here? Like, how, like, listen, PoE isn't like a fucking 1v9 player. He's not going to hard carry the game, is he? Like, to some degree, you need the team to be good, and then it enables him to carry. Like, I don't see where you get hyped on this one. And I'll just say this right now. I'm probably going to do a whole separate video on this because it deserves its own, like, 20-minute rant with all straight fire analogies. What the fuck is the obsession with the LCS orgs in all having to have Huni at some point in history? Have I missed something? That was fucking 6 years ago! What is this? Dude, people are acting like he's like prime Michael Jordan, like, we got to get him. Oh my god, Huni's available. Yeah, look, why do you think he's available every year, you dumb fuck? What? Because no one wants him anymore. It's like, Huni's like some fucking super hot girl at the bar who's got a terrible personality. You've already slept with her, you idiot. After you've done that, you have to experience a personality. Yeah, the next guy's going to get tricked. He hasn't slept with her yet, has he? Like, fucking hell, the Hooney equation's killing me.
This is like a reality TV roster though. Like,
It is, isn't it?
This is where the hype is to be had though. The hype is to be had on the potential train wreck, and also I think this roster is going to be like really fun to watch. Like I get your point completely, where it's like from a winning perspective, would I be hyped on this roster? Hell no. This roster won't do anything on any level if I had to guess, including NA. But you've got Hooney, who's going to perpetually coin flip top lane, which is going to be fun to watch, I guess. You've got Power of Evil, who is a good player capable of making like big plays, putting teams on his back for games, some games, right? And then you've got this horrible bot lane amalgam of a once great player who, does he speak English? I don't know, maybe.
A little bit, yeah.
Playing with this rookie ADC who no one really has any kind of read on. And it's all being coached by the biggest legend, I guess, in their franchise's history, but who has no coaching experience whatsoever. And to me, honestly, comes across generally as a fairly reserved, sort of timid guy who I can't imagine actually exerting any kind of authority on this, what will be a very chaotic roster if I had to guess. So to me, this is like content gold. To me, this is like...
Right.
Reggie's fueling his main business, right? Which is content. So there you go. So,
there you go. You've got the angle. As if I missed this one, Rich, after I've always told people my favourite TV show is TSM Legends. Yeah. So I forgot the dynamic that works, which is the worse the rosters do and the better the episodes are, aren't they? Like, obviously everyone wants to watch when they go out of Worlds or something. Like, you're right, that's the angle. I've got to get in on that. I was thinking it was a real game and we were trying to win Worlds or some boys.
This is actually, they've actually checkmated you, though. They've actually checkmated you. You're like, oh, can they please stop talking about how, the League of Legends division makes money? This is where they're going to make their money, off the back end of a successful MTV series or something that they're going to put on here. This is going to be... I mean, I'm actually hyped to watch this team, but not for any of the reasons why I should be. I think it's going to be the best kind of clusterfuck.
What do you think, Dexter? Have you got some... Is there any rays of sunlight that you come through in your window?
I mean, yeah, I think they have to compete against Team Liquid and C9, who are obviously... on paper, much better rosters. So for me, it would be like not a miracle, but it would be very, very hard to overcome these two teams. And if they can't even overcome these two teams, how is it possible for them to do like really well on an international scale? So for me, we have to see. There's like parts about it with PoE, right, that can shine. But what is the next step? For me, like I understand, like if this fails, like what is the solution, right? How do you fix this thing? Because next year, how do you move forward if you don't accomplish your goal, right? Are you gonna like who are the players that you can get, right? I don't know. Like for me, we have to see. I'm not really sure that I would put them in the top 2 right now, at least. And they have to compete for the top 5 probably with EG and the 100 Thieves. So let's see how they do against EG and 100 Thieves, and the rest, the 5 other teams. I don't really think that that can compete in that same bracket. I think I would say, at least if I would put my personal ranking on this.
Just a really quick point about the sort of hidden cost of a team that fans, for example, never think about as well, is one of the other reasons why this roster is so hot garbage is that in all likelihood, you will have to make changes at the end of the year, right?
Yes.
Because this is not all going to go swimmingly well. And it's not just about, okay, this guy's on whatever, 500K, and we're replacing him with 500K, so that's net even, right? That's not how it works. Most of these players are signed to multi-year deals. Every time you make a change, it's actually super expensive. Like there are these hidden costs of, like mandatory severance packages that all employees in the California area are entitled to of X months, right? Like it's not just as simple as, and just loads of small like ad hoc admin things that people don't even think about relocating people, plane flights, gear, all these hidden costs. It's super expensive every time you change a player, right? And they're most likely going to have to change multiple players. So you can look at a deal like Perks, for example, where there's huge upfront cost. And no matter how you look at the Perks deal, it's an expensive deal. But if the situation does go swimmingly, they'll have no additional costs attached to that, right? Unless they renegotiate a contract or something like that. And again, if he's to leave, it will almost certainly be as a sale, as a buyout, right? Whereas with a bunch of these players, if Spicker has a bad season, like no one's paying.
Not going to be worth anything.
Exactly. Same with Lost. Same with Hooney, you would hope. I mean, maybe with Hooney, someone still...
There's probably one team left that hasn't had him yet, I know.
Yeah, but generally speaking, in theory, and Sword Art as well. Sword Art's, like, you're already saying he wasn't looking as, at his peak the last time we saw him internationally. If he's then exposed on a North American level, I mean, this guy has no value if that happens. Like, no value. So none of these players, apart from Power of Evil, actually have a realistic sell-on value, if we're honest.
If people don't know, especially Sword Art, that's actually probably the worst soft asset you've just acquired, because as far as I was told from people who are like my LPL connections, they basically said, like, that was one of the only teams in the LPL he would even be playing for. Like, the other teams, there's so much talent in the LPL, they'll try out like the rookies, 18 he's like getting on in age. I think he's like 23, 24 something now. So basically in the LPL, that's considered like what would for us be like 30. Like, you're ancient at that point in time. You better be like amazing. And people forget, Suning at the end of the year was second at Worlds. They started the year as like no one even knew if they'd be a contender. They would be like barely a playoff team. So I don't think people realise that, like, that's, if anything, you have absolutely bought high when his like level of performance is at its lowest. It's actually by definition one of the worst moves I think I've ever seen in League of Legends. Just on this scale though, like, it's actually crazy. And I'd also throw in as well, like, this is the part that doesn't make any sense to me about doing this move, is when you sign a team like this, I don't even know, aside from that content angle, what you really believe is the best case scenario. Because as you say, I think you're right. These are a bunch of gamblers. Almost every player is a gambler. I think Peoria is the only one who isn't really a gambler. And even then, I think if you put the wrong team around him, he could just look quite mediocre, I can't really see like what they think is going to work about this. That's the part I have a very hard time with.
I guess it's like it's theoretically a talent stack, but there's actually not even as much talent in there as they think there is. Like, Huni right now, I would not say is on any level really, super, super talented if you're gauging him against peers in the league. I think Sword Art, it's never like, Sword Art was never like Mad Life, right? Anyway, he was never like some super insane mechanical god. A lot of his value was predicated on thoughts people had about his communication and his leadership skills and stuff like this. So, if his either if his skills are diminished or if he's not able to communicate as he did in previous teams because of the language barrier, or maybe the meta's just moved away from where he was strong or whatever, there's a huge possible loss of value there. Power of Evil is a talented player. That's the one guy I look at on this team and say the talent level is there. This guy is talented versus his peers, but it's not like he's top one, right?
Yes,
he's not even
exactly.
top two, I would say. Yeah. So, and then Lost, who the hell knows? So this looks like a Redditor did a talent stack, but didn't actually really understand what he was looking at, or just had outdated information. So and then they're not gonna win. This team is not gonna win on beautifully maneuvered, season 4 Korean macro, right? That's not gonna happen.
Yes.
So how do you win? Like, how do you win with this team? Basically, the way I see it is Power of Evil has to monster hard carry, and I guess Sword Art just is the exact player they hope he will be. That's the only path to victory I can see, and I think that's so unlikely.
Right, here's the banter. This is how this team was made. I've reverse engineered it, boys. When they do those fun challenges in sports where it's like, right, build a team out of these players, you have $20, and like the $10 players like Ronaldo, like the fucking, you go like that. Well, obviously the joke is, like, most of them, you can see how it broke down there. Like, obviously Spicker and fucking Lost, they saved, those are the $1, $2 ones. But the point is, they lost automatically this game because whoever the fuck put Sword Art in the $10 one, like, they chose the worst of the $10 players. So they've, by even that game, they've lost. They fucked it up, boys. Man alive. Can't even believe this is real.
This is pretty interesting.
Oh, and I'll say one other thing as well. Listen, if you're going to, as Reginald has, like, one thing people always ignore for some reason about TSM, it's bizarre to me. Maybe it's because Americans still have that denial that, like, they should ever import players, because that's why they keep that cycle going of, like, why aren't we developing players? And then they all just cheer for the team that has all the fucking European imports and, like, a Korean top laner that wins. I love this team. And, like, why is the other team bad? Like, there's a reason Gold Guardians isn't the most popular team in the league. I'll say this, right? Reginald was the only one who, in my opinion, in this sense is a moron, where he had Bjergsen grandfathered in as a fucking resident, and he didn't use that to abuse his team to just stack extra non-stop 3 imports the whole time, right? And also, most notably, he never brought in Koreans. He never allowed, like, Asian elite players to join TSM because I know his logic was that, they won't be able to communicate as well, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I don't think he looked at the downside, which is your other fucking team can barely communicate or do anything. But the idea that you're going to go, you know what? No to Chovy. No to Uziak. Like, whoever it is that could have been, like the biggest signings ever. Right. Now's the time I'm going to pull the trigger. Sword Art in 2021. Like, that's just so whack. Like, if I was a fan of TSM, I know, like, we've tried to speculate that they're trying to do this to please fans, like, we've got big names. It's like, yeah, but they're just illusions, aren't they? You've just got, like, cardboard cutouts. Like, I want a real player. Like, if I'm a TSM fan, especially now Bjergsen's gone, give me a fucking banger player. Even if it's not someone that's, like, the best. Why aren't we ones getting upset? That would be the question I'd be asking if I'm a TSM fan or something. Like, why isn't he in our team? Like, someone where there's all this upside, you know, and there could be a superstar player. So, I don't know. Anyway.
I think so much as well of, like, Cloud9 and at certain points Team Liquid or whatever's success when they've had success has been off the back of Impact being incredibly experienced and reliable, and obviously a lot of that he didn't get from North America, right?
Yep.
And he's a player who's always been able to, even you start downing him, think, okay, maybe this is Impact's down year, really not looking that good, and then randomly at like the most important moment he becomes super relevant again, and then it forces the opposition into completely redoing their game plan, like mid-series sometimes, right? Because like, fuck, Impact can still play the game, right? If TSM at any point had like even just an Impact or a Someday or something, right? It would have completely changed the dynamic of that roster. But they, and you know, top lane in Korea as well, like people can say, you know, if you're importing, and I've never been someone who's been like an import first guy, right? Sure. To me, it's usually, obviously, if there are better domestic options, you'd rather have them, right? For a plethora of reasons. But when you look to import and people say, you know, oh, so much of the value is lost in the communication, blah, blah, blah. Top lane really is an area where that doesn't suffer nearly as much. They kind of live on an island for huge chunks of the game in various different metas. And also, top lane is an area where regardless of how you balance, like, oh, which region is the best, blah, blah, blah. Historically, Korea has had by far the best top laners. It's not like, oh, Korean mids, but then again, EU mids, right? Like, that's a fun conversation. But no, Korean top laners, by far the best. And again, because the communication thing is slightly mitigated because of the position that they play, why on earth TSM never looked to get themselves an Impact or a Someday or whatever during their runs in the previous years, I'll never know, because I actually think that could have been a singular move that actually would put them over the top internationally, not to win worlds, but to get out of fucking groups at least. Like, I think that was definitely achievable, but I think they prioritized quite strangely. And I think the idea of going for Korean support where, you know, communication is such a huge part of the game, and a player whose entire performance is directly related to how his ADC performs is just nonsense, almost on an objective level, just because of the tick boxes you have to go through to make the deal worth it. It just makes no sense to me at all.
And I also think, just as an aside, if the true strength of Sword Art, like the narrative of his career, is he's this like great shot caller leader, you're already limited. It doesn't matter how good he can speak basic fluent English, you're limiting that. Like, it's not as good as if he's speaking his native language. When you say that though, Rich, here's the thing, just to trigger TSM fans, go back to any of your favourite TSM lineups. So probably, you know, Double if Bjergsen won. Just imagine the same team. Remember, that team could have had another import. In top lane, we've just got Someday or Impact, who, by the way, played in the same fucking league at the same time. Like, that already is a team where it looks like, wow, that team probably would get out of groups. So, you know, that could have actually achieved its potential, maybe. It's actually kind of sad when you think back in that sense.